Distributive justice. We may think of a human society as a more or less self-sufficient association regulated by a common conception of justice and aimed at advancing the good of its members. As a cooperative venture for mutual advantage, it is characterized by conflict as well as an identity of interest. There is an identity of interest, since social cooperation makes possible a life for all than any would have if everyone were to try to live by his own efforts, yet at the same time men are not different as to how the greater benefits produced by the joint labors are distributed, for in order to further their own aims it prefers a larger to a lesser share. A conception of justice is a set of principles for choosing between the social arrangements which determine the division and for underwriting a consensus as to the proper distributive shares. Now at first sight the most rational conception of justice would seem to be utilitarian. For consider, each man in realizing his own good can certainly balance his own losses against his own gains. We can impose a sacrifice on ourselves now for the sake of a greater advantage later. A man quite properly acts as long as others are not affected to achieve his own greatest good, to advance his ends as far as possible. Now, why should not a society act on precisely the same principle? Why is it not that which is rational is the case of one man right in the case of a group of men? Surely the simplest and most direct conception of the right, and so of justice, is that of maximizing the good. This assumes a prior understanding of what is good, but we can think of the good as already given by the interests of rational individuals. Just as the principle of individual choice is to achieve one's greatest good, to advance so far as possible one's own system of rational desires, so the principle of social choice is to realize the greatest good, similarly defined, summed over all the members of society. We arrive at the principle of utility in a natural way. By this principle a society is rightly ordered and hence just, when its institutions are arranged so as to realize the greatest sum of satisfactions. The striking feature of the principle of utility is that it does not matter, except indirectly, how the sum of satisfaction is distributed among individuals, any more than it matters, except indirectly, how one man distributes his satisfaction over time. Since certain ways of distributing things affect the total sum of satisfaction, this fact must be taken into account in arranging social institutions, but according to this principle, the explanations of common-sense perceptions of justice and their seemingly stringent character is that they are those rules which experience shows must be strictly respected and departed from only under exceptional circumstances if the sum of advantages is to be maximized. The precepts of justice are derived from the one end of attaining the greatest net balance of satisfactions. There is no reason in principle why the greatest gains of some should not compensate for the lesser losses of others, or why the violation of the liberty of a few might not be made right by a greater good shared by many. It simply happens, at least under most conditions, that the greatest sum of advantages is not generally achieved in this way. From the standpoint of utility, the strictness of common-sense notions of justice has a certain usefulness, but as a philosophical doctrine it is irrational.